Jordan, how's hey, my good friend? How are you?
Alexander the Great. I'm doing well. How you doing?
Alexander the Great. I'm great. I'm the luckiest guy on earth. I got back in from New Jersey yesterday. I have something very specific I want to ask you about today.
Let's do it.
Um, I've been talking a lot of my friends lately about this very specific, fascinating, interesting problem where, I think you and I had this conversation the other day, and then I had it with some other folks about people who are suddenly and a bit unexpectedly feeling a loss of identity. And we kind of had a long talk about this, but I think my opinion is that, especially if you're in real estate, if you're a real estate investor and you were a real estate investor for the last 10 years, and now the real estate market is like tight and has been tight for a couple of years now. It's not been easy since about 2021, depending on what your
What you're doing?
industry is, specifically what you're doing. Yeah, but it's been certainly the margins have been smaller across the board since about 2021, 2022. And so it's a long time to hold on. And it doesn't look like it's letting up anytime soon, not in any meaningful fashion. And it's certainly not going to come back to the way it was in 2008, 2009, when it was really easy. And so I think a lot of these folks that are coming and they're saying, "Hey, like I don't really know what I want to do. I don't know who I am." They've pledged a lot of their identity into being a real estate investor. And now that being a real estate investor is brutally hard and or just flat out, for a lot of folks, not profitable, they're like, well, shoot, now what? So it's an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic to lose a business and part of you, and maybe a community and part of your identity along with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, maybe I might think about it in a little bit plainer terms. It's versus because identity is a kind of a tough topic for me. I mean, I think engagement, structure for your day, knowing what you're working towards, having the same consistent set of things and people that you talk to and build with. That's to me what I think that probably forms your identity in real time to a large extent. And oh, are we still there? Looks like we hit a.
Yeah, you're good.
Did I lag for a bit? Okay.
You're
Yeah, I
good.
guess all I'm trying to say is like uh, the main problem is I think a pretty fundamental one, which a lot of people who have 9 to 5s don't really have to deal with. It's if I'm doing this with my time and suddenly I'm not doing this anymore and I have my time back, what the hell do I do with my time? What do I tell people that I do? What do I hang my hat on? How do I draw my larger objectives? And that's the sort of valley that you might be describing that a lot of people seem to be in.
Two things you said. You said, how do I describe myself to people? I think that's such an important problem because I deal with that. And I think about that as a part of identity a lot. It's how do you describe yourself to people? Hey, I'm a real estate investor. Oh, what kind of real estate do you buy? It's like, oh, I haven't in like 3 or 4 years. Maybe not that long, but yeah.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, and whatever you tell other people you are kind of sets this stage about how other people know you. So identity can certainly be some internal belief, description. It could be a lot of things internally, but really it's how, in a lot of ways, it's how the world knows you. And how the world knows you is kind of what you tell them, and to a larger degree, like what you do with your time. I mean, certainly you don't want to lie. Um, yeah, so I think that's really interesting is the external part, the what do you tell people you do. But the first part you
Yeah.
said, I've been grappling with this for a couple years, and it's actually, I think this is one of the most interesting dynamics of our culture, which is when you're broke, money solves basically all your problems. And so you're like, how do I make more money? Which making money is simple, not easy, right? You have a one solution patch for all of your problems. Money will solve this, money will solve this, money. When you get money,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have a little bit of money. You're like, as I like to say, money solves money problems. When you get some money, you start to find all these other problems. All these other problems, identity, purpose, meaning, community, other things like relationships, health, all these things that there is no amount of money in the world that can fix at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of these things, it's like the fix is quite unknown and sometimes unfixable. And so I always say, like, when you're broke, money fixes all your problems. But when you uh, having enough money is a much harder problem. Like, you have all these other problems that are much harder to solve.
Yeah, I think what you just described is what can be at least framed by the hierarchy of needs. model, right? So when you're at the bottom, when you just need shelter and food and security, it's pretty straightforward, concrete, tangible what you need to spend your time doing and how your life might improve. Once you have all those things, you would sort of expect the questions to get more complex and the solutions you might need to get more sophisticated and also more abstract, more nebulous, which you could suddenly have all these different ways you can go. I could spend my time doing this, and this, and this thing, or I could do this one, and then you get into the whole like, why is one better than the other? Well, what's meaningful at all? You're really in trouble in a sense if you have time to ask these questions. I mean, a video I actually think about a lot. I got to go back and find it so I can send this clip to people, but I found it quite amusing at the time, but it sort of stuck with me. It was just a video of somebody traveling to Africa and talking to tribesmen and just sort of asking them questions that to understand how they think and how they structure their lives. And there was a section of it where he was asking pretty broad philosophical questions like, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose? What is your purpose? That kind of thing. And there might have been something of a translation issue, but I think ultimately they just didn't really have an answer to that because they're like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I? What do you mean? Tonight we're going to go get meat. Where you see those gazelle over there, we're going to go hunt them and bring them back to the camp. That's the meaning of life. And that was just funny to me because it's like once you scale up, once you like don't have to go into the getting meat is as easy as going to the grocery store. Suddenly, you might start asking yourself questions that are a bit harder to answer than what am I doing tonight? It's like, what am I doing with my life? Where do I want it to go? How do I fit into this really kind of complex machinery that society is? And I mean, just add on to one of the points of mine that you commented on about describing yourself to people. I think that's important for more than superficial reasons. It's not just the first impression you make, but they're also forming to some extent index in their head of like, okay, this person's knowledge goes deeper on this point. If you say you're a real estate investor, this person must know about financial freedom. They must know about investing in this and that. They must know how to build a business and hire VAs. And that's also an important thing to give people because if, I probably both agree the network is really important. And if you want to be a part of people's network, you have to be able to communicate to them where you fit in. So it's just kind of responding to a few of the things you said.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna go backwards from that. Yeah, if you tell people, it's like having two conversations at once. It's so funny. So you ever text somebody you having two conversations on text at once, and they're doing this leapfrog thing?
Yeah.
So I apologize to listeners.
There was a couple different threads there.
They'll be fine. Yeah. How you describe yourself, it's not superficial. I don't mean to make it sound like, I didn't mean to intend it to sound superficial. It's certainly not everything, but in so many ways, especially for an extrovert like me, it's a very important part. It's also how you get things done. Like it's very pragmatic. If you're like, hey, I want to real estate deals, the first thing I open up with every single person, or if I want to meet real estate people, it's like, I'm a real estate investor. Right now, I'm sort of in this weird place where I'm a real estate investor, but I'm also a videographer. And so I kind of open with both, which is fine. But it does create this weird rabbit hole where, what is it that you want to do with your days? Because that's what you want to open up with. This was one of the first things I learned about getting ahead in life, where, you become whatever obsession you have, whatever you want to become, you start telling people that. You just talk to everybody about it, because then that's how I met my partner, Roderick, who's one of my closest friends, my longest partner. I mean, my life would be a 180 without him. And it's because I was going around to like, what do you do? I want to buy real estate. I want to buy real estate. And he's like, oh, I own a bunch of real estate. And then we hashed it out, for like 4 or 5 hours. And he taught me a ton of stuff when we became partners. So opening with who you are / what you do, whatever the amalgamation of information you want to give is so important, because it's, in so many ways, not only does it set the tone for what you can do with a person, what they know about you, like if you do want to become a real estate investor and you start telling everybody that, it's funny, then you become more of a real estate investor, because now everybody treats you as such, and then they bring you deals, and like, oh, I got this thing. Well, I got a photo gig. Who am I going to call? I'm in the real estate industry, and I got a video gig. Who am I going to call? It's like, I'm going to call Alex. So
exactly, yeah.
And then what am I doing? What am I doing with my time out in New Jersey? I'm at a real estate investor meetup with my camera. So then now everybody sees me doing the same thing. It's reinforcing. Again, it's external, but I think external is a lot of our identity. It is, chicken or egg. Which one starts first? Do I say I'm this thing and then I go to these things that, are equivalent, or do I do this and then I say it out loud and then people know me. But who you hang out with and what you do with your time, I don't know if it starts or ends with telling somebody this is what I do or this is who I am.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to use a unnecessary fancy word. I would say it's dialectical, your identity. So you say what you are based on observations, and then that feeds into what you do, who you're around, which feeds back into what you can observe as being. So it's an evolving process, feedback.
Us laymen call it the chicken or the egg.
Well, but for the chicken and the egg, there doesn't necessarily need to be feedback, which is the only reason I went to dialectical, because, the chicken having the egg doesn't change the chicken necessarily.
To your first point about the African tribe not knowing or not bothering to care about what some grander purpose is. I think I once heard the quote, some philosopher said, philosophy is a rich man's game. And I believe that to be true. If you don't have all your needs met, you're not spending a lot of time pondering the purpose. You're tilling the farm trying to get basic needs, basic food done, right? It's just a lot more time.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things about American culture is we've built this quality of life that's so absurdly rich and wealthy, and it's so actually democratized. Like, it's so spread out that, like, even the poor people are pretty rich compared to certainly what I would consider actual poverty, right? That we all have a lot of time to sit around and think about our problems, and that's kind of a new phenomenon, at least at scale. And new, not even just to the world, but like to the United States. It's like not been very many generations, and I mean 2 or 3, and now this is probably the most egregious generation because of cell phones. Because like now, not only do I sit around, it's like sitting around has become it's not pure boredom.
Engaging.
It's not just like
stimulating.
It's like
yeah.
So sitting around doing nothing has become stimulating and inexpensive. I mean, you don't need that much. It doesn't cost that much to eat at its core level, and the cell phones are cheap.
And in some ways, I think also it's discouraging, sort of along the lines of what we were just talking about, because I think it goes even a layer beneath what you were just saying, in that, not only do I have time to sit around and think about my problems, I can sit around and think about what my future set of problems will be, like the sorts of problems I want to be solving. And then you log on to social media and you see all these people niched into these extreme occupations, performing it with such an unbelievable level of skill, like whether it's professional sports or whether they're unbelievably wealthy through business or whether they're a famous New York Times multi-bestseller author. And you just sit there on your couch thinking like, oh man, I'm never going to catch that, never going to catch that, never going to catch that. And it sort of like freezes you in this spot, because it's like, okay, I'm kind of comfortable here, and it seems like the gap between me and anywhere else is too large. So should I really make many movements in too many directions at all? It's like I think social media is like a mindset thing. It can be inspiring, but can also be paralyzing in that sense.
Yeah, I get affected by it. I don't think I get affected as negatively by it as other people. I could be wrong. I just my sense of it, just because I don't know. I'm still kind of out there doing stuff. It's not like I get too paralyzed. I'm a little bit. I'm not that competitive, but I see somebody make something and I'm like, I don't know, I can do that. Most of my Instagram is videographers, which is a fascinating little weird thing about my life, because I don't have any videographer friends. Like, my world is real estate people, but I don't follow the real estate people on the internet. I'm like, you guys are all boring. So I follow the videographers and I learned how to make cool stuff. But then what's interesting is I go and make cool stuff for the real estate people, and they're like, dude, we've never seen this before. And I'm like, that's because you follow all real estate investors, all the videographers. I'm like, this trend is old,
Right.
I'm behind. So I think, but it sometimes gets me where I'm like, I'm never going to be the best videographer. I see some of these guys make stuff and I'm like, I can tell you right out of the gate, my fucking brain don't work that way. It just, I can't see it. I can't even know how you did what you did after the fact. Never mind, could you imagine it before the fact? I'm looking at this going like, how did this get created? But hang on, let me last thing on this. What I think is interesting is I'm very confident actually I can become the best videographer in the real estate investing world. And when you start combining things, you get weird ways to create a great self that you then can't see. I can't see. I don't see that on Instagram. I don't see that person. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. Yeah. I think the other problem is that the algorithm is actively sorting videographers and showing you an average value that is way too high relative to what it should actually be. So like your work is probably better than most other videographers, or at least like wherever your position is in the percentile. It's just like not represented by social media. But at the same time, to your point, I mean, so it's
I don't want
just
to see the
something I
shitty
do as a
ones,
hobby, but I
so
follow.
it's fine.
Yeah, right, right, exactly, exactly. But like that would give you context. But similarly to what you're saying, and this is, I mean, obviously just a hobby, but you know, we both like powerlifting, and I've been getting into that lately and doing some competitions. So a lot of the people I follow now are powerlifters, and at first I would watch just what people are presenting to the internet and just be like, what the hell? I'm super weak. Like I shouldn't be doing this sport at all. And then you get some confidence, you get stronger, you make progress, you get in a rhythm. And then it sort of becomes like, now I see people doing stuff and it reminds me what the ceiling is, right? It's like you get super excited because you lift over 500 pounds off the ground. You get on the Instagram, you see someone weighing the same weight doing 800 pounds. And it's like, even if I don't want to go to 800, that person's a human and they have a human body and they lifted, you know, 60% as much weight as I did after I've been training for 2 years. So that's good to know that how deep this goes.
Yeah, I think what you said about seeing this outsized set of super performers, you know, the guys I follow on some of these videographers are insane. And now there's a trend where lesser good videographers will do, like, you ever see like political review stuff or like music review? Like the regular person is watching somebody else do the art and commenting on it. That's like a big trend now. So in my world,
Yeah.
my little videographer world, the videographers, some of the artists have gotten so good that there have become people like me, essentially regular folks, regular humans, mortals, watching other videographers like art, replaying it and breaking it down, and they're like, how did they do this? And doing commentary. And so those sort of things actually do level the field, because then you have other people now and they're going, that's good, isn't it? Like, I can't do that either. Let's talk about it. And so that, in a weird way, creates the flattening of the pyramid a little bit in terms of what the content you see is, because now it's not just only these, you know, these 10 camera guys or these, or, it's not Andy Bolton doing
Right.
1,100 pound deadlifts, and you're like, oh, I can't get there, and you're like, right, but it's Andy, it's the best guy of all time at this. Like, what about the 60th best guy? You might have a chance, you know, but they're not. So I think when you get the curve starts flattening out a little bit.
Yeah.
How can I make this useful to somebody who's listening? If they're like, yeah, my Instagram, I hear, you know, Brandon Turner, I got 13,000 units. You know,
Yeah.
how do I catch up to that? You got any meaningful advice?
How do you catch up to Brandon Turner? It's a bit of a tall
No.
order. I mean, I think
No, that's not what I'm saying. Is how do you
Yeah.
create a like a daily structure that removes some of that comparison?
Yeah, well, I think Brandon does a great job actually of breaking this down in his advice to people, which is a lot of times it's just like it's focus on like 1% better, basically. Like he likes to do it with an exponential growth model. It's what he used to talk about in Bigger Pockets all the time. It's like, you know, you don't have that much money, you don't have that much experience. Just buy 2 properties this year. The next year, plan to buy 4. If you have grown your systems well, it should be the same amount of effort. The year after that, buy 8, then buy 16, and then, you know, in 5 years, you've got a good handful of properties there, and you're a real investor. I mean, I suppose you know what I think of when we were talking about Instagram and the super performers and the people that have gotten to these insane levels of performance is the Bill Gates quote about, you know, you overestimate what you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can do in 10. I think that methodological context really helps when viewing those super performers, because then you understand, like, in year 1 they sucked too. In year 2 they just sucked a little bit less, and it wasn't this linear growth. It's like I didn't have to buy 500 properties my first year. It's this hockey stick thing where I'm just learning and getting better, applying myself. And then suddenly at some point, everything starts to pick up and go a lot faster. And you get to a point that you couldn't have imagined before. I mean, you often hear people talking about, I never expected to be in this position. And, you know, what's behind them is not always a stroke of crazy good luck or of genius. It's just like 10 years of of really solid effort and commitment to the craft.
I never thought I'd be in the position I am in life now. No way. I mean, 10 years ago, 31, 2014. No, I was just wrapping up college basically 7 years later than all of my peers, you know? I was just getting out of alcoholism I had no money to my name and I was working for a job I hated. I thought maybe I would get a little financial freedom, but I didn't realize, how high it would go. I hadn't even picked up a camera yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and now you're a fixture in the real estate industry, and we're having a conversation because I think we're both, in a position of like, well, I'm not really entirely sure what I want to do next, and this piece is missing, but just the resources that you have available to make decisions with are just they're awesome. Have you heard or
Yeah.
read the
Well,
book
answer that. I'd like to add the
10x is easier than
confidence. What's
2x? It's
interesting
a
is
Dan Sullivan book.
no,
Sorry, did you hear
I
that last
haven't,
part? We might have broken up a
but I
bit.
have met Dan Sullivan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't
Nice.
read the book, but I have not read the book.
Yeah, I mean, just last one here. It's a quick one. I mean, he just says in the book, he has this like gap versus gain mindset. And one of the exercises he has you do, I mean, gap is basically being like pessimistic, always comparing yourself to ideal. Gain is like nothing happens to me, everything happens for me. And I'm on this upswing, and I just have to figure out exactly how to apply what I've done and what I've learned. And one of the exercises he has you do is he says, you've taken a bunch of 10x leaps already in your life. Stop and reflect on those and think about how you did it. Because I think what we tend to do is as soon as we've accomplished something, we just, wash it away. We minimalize. We say, oh, that must not have been that hard because I did it. And keeping that context in mind shows you that he's like, you've done this before. You did something you didn't think you could do, and you can do it again. And I think your story is a perfect example of that. It's like you're not exactly where you want to be, but you've already 10x from where you were, drinking alcohol and kind of messing around, not knowing what you wanted to do, and now being where you're at.
It's more like 200x.
200x, even better.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting point. I know exactly what it took me to go from broke to real estate investor to we have a pretty good sized portfolio now, and I've done some pretty advanced syndications, and those syndications are still going well for other people. Like I'm still paying out. I'm still, not only do I now have money, I also pay other people profits. In some areas where my peers have failed. So how do you do it again? What did I do? I obsessed. That's what I did. I picked this is very for me at least, it's very infinite jest, or maybe if you're into Jordan Peterson, it's very Jordan Peterson.
I'm the nerd. We're doing infinite jest references.
No.
So people are gonna have to go look up David Foster Wallace now.
No. Like Jordan Peterson kind of talks about something similar too, where it's like go pick the thing that you want to get good at. Just pick it. Brandon's great at this. It almost doesn't matter what you pick. It's that you pick. And you pick the thing. It'd be great if that thing actually works. People pick things that don't work. That makes it harder for sure. But pick a thing that works and just obsess over it for 10 years, regardless of, outside interference. And then, so that's half of it. The other half, for me at least, is curating a social circle that does the thing. So, for example, right
the who
now
not how kind of thing.
I'm not good at doing things in this world. I'm really good at finding somebody else who can do all the things. So for me, real estate was never like, I'm going to go, rehab a house. I'm like, no, I'm going to find somebody who has deals. I'm going to find somebody who pays for deals. I'm going to find somebody who rehabs deals. I'm going to find somebody who finds tenants, and then I'm going to find a tenant, and then I'm going to find a bookkeeper, and she's going to track it all. And I do it's embarrassing. I'm surprised how little I do on my real estate, and it runs so good. I might spend 2 hours a month on it, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's
so I'm gonna do the same thing with whatever the next obsession is.
Trying to remember if it was and then we got to stop making references, but it was either Andrew Carnegie or Henry Ford said the best thing that they do as a leader is surround themselves with people who are way better than them. I think it was Carnegie because he went on to say he didn't know anything about steel, right? He understands people super well, and that's much more important.
Yeah. So the thing that we want to buy now is food franchises, and I'm like, I don't know anything about food franchises. I don't, I don't know anything about this. Nor do I want to learn. But I know there are people who,
Just gonna,
um, I know there are people who sell food franchises. I know people that have money and are looking for interesting investments. I know people. I got a call with three people this week actually that are going to help me do uh, build the financial model for it out. Um, I got a guy who's going to do ops, and I got a sick acquisition guy, and that's who the whole business actually is going to revolve around. Is this guy that I found that I'm like, this guy is a deal fiend, and he will
yeah,
spend all day calling people, brokers, sellers. He will just spend his whole day on the phone beating people down to get deals, and I'm like, okay, that's the hardest part.
yeah.
Everything else I can build. I can build a whole business
So
around this.
yeah, if I'm a listener now, I'm asking like, all right, that sounds great. I'd love to find people who can do this stuff for me, but how are you finding these people, and how are you convincing them to apply their
You know what's funny?
abilities in
This is a
your
great.
direction?
So this is a great segue because I just made my first PDF giveaway, and I call it "How to Make Friends as an Adult," and it's basically 10 steps to where are all the people hanging out? How do you reach out to these folks? And it's almost too rudimentary, um, but in some ways, I think people need sometimes the simple beat into their face. But how do you find people? Well, look, man, there's 8 billion of them, and they're all on this thing. So,
Hmm.
and they're all. We live in an age, especially in American life. If you're an American, we live in a life where people are overwhelmingly lonely and isolated. So not
Yep.
only are they easy to find, they're desperate for friends or community. I don't want to say friends always, but like they're desperate for some. They don't know what it is. It's basically they're a lot of them, especially if they're male, they're desperate for war. And by war, I mean they
Hmm.
want something with a team to go conquer.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you go find them, and then you're like, I have something we can go conquer together. Let's go conquer this thing over here. I'm astounded. Actually, I made one post the other day. I was like, anybody work with me with this project? They got to do like financial um, data entry and analysis,
And no pay
and
on this post. I saw this.
no pay, and a hostile
Yeah,
work environment. And
yeah.
I probably got 30 emails.
Hell yeah.
Right now, the
So,
majority of them
so I guess
are the wrong fit, but it's like there's no shortage of people that want to work with you.
but I mean, to some extent, you have reach, right? I mean, if I'm just starting from scratch, do I need to build that platform before I can start posting and just connecting with people? Do I need to do more outreach, more outbound than inbound?
You always need to be doing outbound. That's where my superpower is like I just want to talk to people. So I think, but I also think that there's a muscle there. I think a lot of folks don't try at all, and they're like, how do I do the thing that you do, Alex? And I'm like, well, I'm not doing anything special. How did you get on this podcast, Jordan?
How did I get on this podcast? You asked me to
Yeah,
get
how'd you
on
get
it.
on here today?
WhatsApp
There you
message.
go. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
wonder if I asked how many people. I bet you I could get like I know people that have clout and resources and fame. I could get them on here too because I'd ask. Now, some of that is like once you know somebody, they'll do a lot for you. So it's hard to ask like, um, I'm not a good marketing guy. I don't go out and like I don't have a big email list. I don't do one to many. I do one to one, which
Yeah.
anybody can do. Anybody can go on the internet. Like I became friends with Jay Scott because I saw him posting on Facebook, and I was like, this guy's clever. Let me write him something. And then five
Yeah.
years later, we just became friends. Mindy Jensen, Scott Trench, all these people that are in my bigger pockets world. I mean, how I got a hold of. I went and worked with Brandon for a year. Our first real conversation was in 2022 when I called him up and I asked him to donate money to a charity hike that I was doing. That was like the first time we really. I had talked to him a few times at a conference, but that was the first time we ever had talked for like an hour. And I
Yeah.
called him and asked for something. And that's how the thing. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm also building this thing out here in Maui that I might want you to work on. Um, how did you and I meet?
At a real estate conference at RubeCon. What year was that? 2021? 2022?
Yeah, yeah. Is that special? Is that some secret formula?
No. And the only reason we met is because I knew about you because I heard you on a bigger podcast episode, and then we were friends on Facebook after that, and you were just so loud all the time that you were like top of mind. And so the second I saw you, I recognized you and I like came up and talked to you and then we like hung out that whole conference. To your point.
That's a little bit harder to do. But I have a whole bunch of theories on this too about, not how to be loud because I think that can be taught, but I think most people would not want to learn it. But I do think there's things like, the reason that you and I connect so well is because of books. I think if you read books,
Yeah.
if you read real books, not Dan Sullivan, not
Well,
not
I mean,
not marketing books. I'm not saying
with
they're use, I'm
apologies
not saying that
to
you should.
folks.
I'm not saying you shouldn't read those things. But what I'm saying is, if you read interesting books,
Yeah.
occasionally, if you read an interesting book by an obscure author or an interesting author, or if you read something that just, isn't the
Classic.
marketing book of the day, classic literature. You want to have a conversation with Alex? Go read Moby Dick. I will talk about that
Yeah.
book for freaking days. And nobody's read it because they're like, oh, it's about Ahab and a whale. And it's like, yeah, that thick, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And fascinating and weird and kind of boring, mostly boring. But if you want to,
Yeah.
if you want people to stick out in your head, speak loud. That's harder to teach, but be interesting. But you're not going to be interesting unless you consume interesting media.
Yeah, that's I don't know how actionable a piece of advice that is because I don't know for someone I don't know who your target listener is. For someone just starting out, they probably shouldn't go read like Wealth of Nations and Moby Dick and On the Origin of Species and get interesting in an
Maybe.
academic sense, right?
Well, that was just one example. I mean, the number one
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
is the easiest thing is if you know what you want, you know, like get a little courage. The easiest one is this: if you know what you want, get a little courage. Be able to be succinct and say, "Hey, I'm looking for people who buy food franchises. I'm looking to buy real estate. Do you know anybody that buys, sells, invests in real estate, or
yeah,
whatever it is, the thing that you want to do? Hey, I want gym friends. Who's like a power lifter?" And if you can get the question, the want, very concise, so that somebody can help easily. Because if you ask somebody like, "Hey, how do I invest in real estate?" No, that's not going to work. But if you have a very specific question, like, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody
yeah,
in Austin, Texas, that buys food franchises," right? If you have that information, can you tell them to text this number or give me their number, whatever it is, very specific. Then I dare you to go. This is my rule. This is how I do it. Go to your phone book and your phone and just message everyone,
mm,
every single body on there. I don't care if you haven't talked to them in 12 years. I really don't care. You just blast this whole couple of hundred, couple of thousand list of people with this. This is what I'm trying to do. And
yeah.
not only does it become an identity thing like we talked about earlier, you probably get a good hit rate. And then the hit rate, even if they're useless, I don't know, you just don't know.
Yeah. And
You
this
don't need that many.
that
And you can do the same thing with Instagram, Facebook, email. You can go down the list.
that's such a powerful idea. I mean, I think it comes back to the who, not how mindset again. And it's one that really is. So I had to work very hard to undo the how, not who sort of perspective because my first instinct is always to go to try to build stuff and solve things from first principles. Like if I'm going to train for a race, I'm going to build my own program and figure out how to get good at running. And that's just so fucking stupid. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on the podcast, but it's dumb, right? It's like, uh, so in that it's just dumb because you're learning things that other people have learned and you're making mistakes that other people have made and you're gaining no benefit from it. It's not getting you further along. It's just stymieing your progress and making you think what you're working on is impossible or that you're not good at it. And so I mean, it took the opposite approach recently with powerlifting. Again, just a hobby, but something I'm having a lot of fun with. And instead of like saying, okay, how do I get stronger in this period of time? How do I meet these goals? I'm just going to go on Instagram and message every single top power lifter that I can find. When I ran out of people that I was already following, I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of names with account handles and a short description of like what they do. And I just like messaged like 100 people and maybe like 10% of them responded. I got like 10 responses, but they were all top lifters and 3 of them offered to train me. And it was that easy. And it's not like I was coming into it having an impressive resume or something like that. So that understanding that alone is probably the most important thing for somebody starting out. It's like, go find people who have done it and associate yourself with them. Don't like bury yourself. Don't like, squirrel away in your basement on your computer building Excel spreadsheets trying to figure out how to invest in real estate.
Yeah, it's just yeah, very well said. I think once you realize that other people want to help, if you can get that mental block, if you come from a very
Yeah,
scarce mindset or very scarce family, like where people are, just a small world view, once you realize deeply that like people want to help, and they might help you for free and they might help you for money, but they want to help you generally. Once you realize
yeah,
that, you're like, oh, you have to ask because they're like sitting around waiting to help. They want to use the things that they've learned
exactly.
to better other people, and not everybody, but like
And
the
not
majority.
if it's like if it's 1%, then all you have to message is 100 of the top people, and you will have one of the top people helping you, right? That's 1% of 100. So it's like even
Yeah,
if the percentage is super small of the people who are available to help, just ask enough people and you'll find somebody.
yeah, dude, love this conversation. I got to wrap.
All right.
How can
Well,
people find you?
Instagram, jhousea. They can go to my Medium page, which is also medium.com/jhousea, and then those are probably the best two ways.
Dope. Yeah, you like to write.
I do like to write.
All right, let's do this again before too long.
Absolutely, man. Great talking with you.
Yeah, you too.